Hello, friend, and welcome to Peaceful Narrator, a place where imagination comes alive through stories told with warmth and calm. Here, every tale invites you to slow down, listen, and feel the world within the words. If you enjoy these moments of peace, consider liking and subscribing so you won't miss a story. There are no ads in the middle or at the end, so you can relax completely. So settle in, let your mind wander, and enjoy the journey. Now, the story begins. Open sky and the Milky Way. The path to the hill was a narrow ribbon of earth, softened by moss and a summer's worth of footsteps. I walked it slowly, feeling the last warmth of the day still held in the ground beneath the soles of my shoes. Grass brushed against my legs and whispered with each step, as if it knew the plan and approved. At the crest of the hill, the world opened like a window on a quiet night. I set down a folded blanket, shook it gently so it settled like a soft cloud, and eased myself onto it. The evening had not yet become night, but it was leaning toward it, with the kind of sigh a day gives when it is ready to rest. The horizon held the final sliver of apricot light, fading into a band of gentle blue. Above it, a single star appeared, tentative as a shy hello. It seemed to hang suspended in the stillness, patient, unwavering. I pulled my knees up and wrapped my arms around them for a moment, then stretched out flat, my head cradled by my hands. The hill felt sturdy beneath me, a long, reassuring presence. A faint breeze drifted up from the valley, carrying a hint of wild mint and the cool, wet smell of distant water. As the light thinned, another star arrived, and then another, until the sky transformed from a pale wash to a living map. I let my gaze soften, breathing slowly, letting the world above me come into focus in its own time. Without the noise of a day's errands or the shape of schedules and lists, the evening seemed to settle into the curves of the earth and the spaces between my ribs. The world was not empty. It was calmly, quietly full. A cricket started its steady rhythm nearby, not loud, just present. Farther down the slope, something small moved through the grass. At first, I thought it was the breeze again, but the rustle had intention. Pausing, then continuing, pausing again, as if the creature knew exactly where it was going and wanted to take time to enjoy it. I breathed deeper, and the smell of clover mingled with the cooling air. From beyond the hill, a soft barnyard scent reached me, comforting in its way, as if somewhere not far away, someone had settled their animals for the evening and swung a door closed with a gentle hand. When the first thin thread of the Milky Way stretched into view, it was so faint I wondered if I had imagined it. Then the thread became a ribbon, the ribbon a wide, pale river arcing from one end of the sky to the other. It did not rush. It did not insist. It simply lay there, luminous and patient, so wide that a person could imagine floating in it. Eyes open, hands outstretched, letting the world's quiet light hold them. I felt my shoulders relax, and the part of my mind that sometimes speaks up to ask for reasons and plans fell still. There were constellations I knew from childhood, learned from a book with pages that smelled like dust and glue. The Big Dipper formed itself first, the ladle ready, the pointer stars drawing a line upward. I traced it with the tip of a finger, not touching anything but the air. There was the North Star, steady at the edge of the Dipper's reach, and near it a smear of faint light, like a thought about the future. To the south, Saturn hung just above the horizon, with a calm, collected glow that felt like a well-tended lamp. I found the teapot of Sagittarius, its spout tilted toward the glowing river, pouring a soft stream into the Milky Way, as if to keep the world well-watered. A low hum arose from the field as night deepened. The insects were not a chorus so much as an atmosphere, a textured quiet that gave shape to the space around me. The leaves of a few nearby poplars, silvered underneath, flickered with the lightest breeze. Their movement was so gentle that the trees seemed to breathe. A moth visited my ankle, touched with a feathery wing, and moved on, star-dusted in its own way. Somewhere, a mouse picked its way through clover like a tiny explorer, making and remaking paths of scent and memory. I have always liked the way stars ask for nothing. They are there, and whether I notice them or not, they continue to pour out their light. On the hill, I let my thoughts become like those quiet points, not pulling, not pushing, simply shining a little, and then fading. I thought of a day long ago when I lay by a lake on a dock that creaked softly with the movement of water, and how the night then had felt enormous but kind. This night felt like that, and also like something new, as if the world were allowing me to see it from a slightly different angle, gentler than before. A faint hoot drifted up the hill, and I turned my head to listen. An owl, somewhere in the patch of trees near the creek, had woken and was checking in, asking no questions, offering no answers. Another hoot answered, and the two sounds fit together like smooth stones in a pocket. I pictured them perched in dark branches, turning their heads, swiveling their quiet faces toward the fields, as if reading a familiar story. The air around me felt tender, like a hand you could lean into. Overhead, the Milky Way brightened. It was as if the sky had drawn a breath and let it out, polishing each tiny light with gentle care. Between the stars, the darkness felt velvety, layered, deep but not empty. A faint, quick streak tore through the dark, a meteor that seemed to decide at the last moment to greet the night. It was so slow my eyes could follow it, then gone so smoothly the sky looked undisturbed. I did not make a wish. Instead, I let the small joy of seeing it spill inside me like warm tea. To my right, where the hill curved down and then rose again toward a little stand of birch. The grasses had caught the day's light and stored it lightly. Their tops held a glow that lingered even as dusk thickened. A firefly appeared, then another, and for a time they hovered and blinked. Small lanterns with no hurry. One drifted so close, I could see its tiny body, the wings a blur, the greenish-yellow light bright and then dim, bright and then dim. It felt like a heartbeat in the air. I listened to my own breathing, slow and even. In the coolness from the valley and the scent of mint. Out, the warmth from my chest, the day's last busy edges smoothing themselves. A small cloud wandered in front of the stars and then away again. Not enough to cover, just enough to add a layer. And when it moved, it left the light above fresher somehow, as if the sky had been gently brushed. This was a time when very little was asked of anyone. The night was not a test. It was a place to rest. I began to name the constellations I could find, quietly, for the pleasure of it. There was Cygnus, the swan, wings outstretched. It lay across the Milky Way, as if it were truly water, the bird floating peacefully, neck long and elegant, beak pointing to the future. There was Lyra, small and compact, like a handful of notes plucked from a string. Aquila, the eagle, flew as well, though here in the grass, the fiercest thing was a determined beetle negotiating a stem. I watched the beetle climb, pause, and continue, simple and focused. Then it slipped into the safe shadow under a leaf, where it likely waited for the night's dampness to arrive. I thought of people I loved and sent them each a quiet word, a memory, like a pebble, placed carefully in a line. I did not turn those thoughts into worry or plans. They were simply presences, as the stars were presences, and that was enough. Somewhere, a cow lowed, and the sound rolled lazily across the fields. The ground beneath me held the day's warmth like a tucked-in quilt. I shifted a little, drew the blanket over my legs, and felt the fabric settle and the edges find their own weight. At the edge of the hill, a more pronounced rustle made me turn my head, slowly, not alarmed. A small shape, light in color, paused and looked my way. A fox, delicate and alert, whose coat in this light seemed almost the color of the dusk itself. It watched me for a long moment, in the easy way wild things do, calculating my place in the landscape and deciding I belonged. Then it moved on, not far from me, the grass parting and closing behind it, without drama. A minute later, I heard the soft patter of its feet on the dry leaves near the birch stand, and then even that sound was swallowed by the field. Once, long ago, I had tried to memorize the names of the stars, to fix them in my mind, as if that would fix anything else. On the hill, I realized the relief of not knowing every name. It was enough, more than enough, to look and to marvel. I drew my hand through the air and imagined my fingers trailing through that pale, starry river. When I closed my eyes, the points of light imprinted themselves gently on the dark behind my eyelids. The image felt like soft embroidery on a wide piece of velvet, intricate but soothing. Somewhere above my left shoulder, a satellite moved in a steady line, its light precise and unblinking. I watched it for a long time, thought about the people who had built it, the careful work and quiet concentration that had gone into sending it into that broad room. It crossed paths with a plane so high up that its sound never reached the hill. Only the faintest wink of red and green hinting at its presence. I wondered where the people inside were going, what they might be thinking, if any of them were pressing their faces to the small windows and feeling the same soft astonishment I felt, looking up from the earth. I noticed a warmth at my elbow and saw that the blanket had slipped aside. I pulled it up and tucked it in, letting the edge rest against my skin. My fingers traced a loose thread and found it smooth. A small reassurance. The grass around me smelled sweeter now, as if the cool had released something within it. Dew had not yet formed, but it was on its way. That clean newness the night brings like a kind guest who takes care not to wake the house. My eyes drifted from star to star, following patterns and paths without needing to arrive anywhere. In the east, A faint lifting hinted at moonrise later, though for now, the sky belonged to the stars and their slow migration. The world was in motion in the gentlest ways, the kind you feel when you hold someone you love and sense their breathing, the subtle rise and fall, the quiet certainty. I let my mind travel along the long curve of the Milky Way, imagining the dust of stars like the fine sand at the edge of a lake. The river of light felt familiar, old and kind in its vastness, as if it had watched a million summer nights and welcomed every face turned upward. The hill had its own small map. A thistle's purple head opened near my knee, soft to look at, bristled to the touch. A cluster of white yarrow lifted its delicate umbrellas nearby, tiny flowers within flowers, a lacework the insects trusted. The bare stems of a winter past stood like thin sculptures, softened to a silvery gray. Farther up, a stone warmed by the day gleamed faintly. I reached out to touch it, and felt it giving back what it had taken in, as if the rock were a little hearth all its own. After a while, a low flight of bats traced arcs above me, their motion effortless, silent stitches in the fabric of the dark. They turned and turned again, and then their shapes disappeared into the invisible architecture of air. For a time, I tracked them, and then my attention returned to the river overhead. The Milky Way peaked, running from horizon to horizon, a long, gentle bow. I thought of a story someone had once told me, that the ribbon of light is the path souls take when they travel. But I did not need stories tonight. The plain beauty of the sky was its own comfort, requiring nothing more than itself. I took another slow breath and noticed the way the hill tuned each sound. When I breathed in, the grass leaned toward me, almost imperceptibly, reacting to the slight pull. When I breathed out, everything settled again. It seemed absurd and also perfectly true that my small movements could be part of the landscape's own patterns. That made me an honest piece of the night, not a visitor. The thought made everything feel closer and more alive. In the quiet, memory came gently. I remembered lying in the back of a pickup truck as a child, the metal ridged under my back, the smell of oil and summer. I remembered learning the trick of keeping your eyes soft to see more stars, how you can look just to the side of a faint point to bring it into view. I used the trick now, and a hazy cluster I had thought was empty space filled with dots. This was not a lesson or a task. It was a kind of play, quiet and contented. Down the hill, the creek made itself known as the air cooled. Its sound was not a rush. It was a companionable murmur, a string of syllables spoken into the night by something that had learned not to hurry. I pictured it moving over stones, around a fallen branch, carrying a leaf slowly downstream. I did not need to see it to feel that small journey. The water's voice blended with the insect's steady pulses, the owl's occasional calls, the wind's gentle threads. Together, these sounds made a blanket that lay over everything without weight. My eyes fell on a shape low on the horizon, a cluster of stars that formed a hook. It was a small pattern, not one of the grand figures that get all the attention. I liked it for that. It felt like a quiet friend, one of those companions you might not notice in a crowded room, but whose presence makes the room easier to be in. The more I looked, the more I found such small friends, triangles and lines, pairs, subtle arcs. The sky, like the hillside, had its big gestures and its small tender ones. Somewhere to my left, a sigh like a gentle brush against fabric made me turn just enough to see a deer lift its head. Its ears were pricked, nose lifting to taste the air. For a moment, our gazes might have met, though it was hard to tell in the low light. Then it lowered its head, took a few steps, and continued grazing. Each motion was careful, not in fear, but in the way of a creature that has learned patient efficiency. I watched it until it became a soft shape among other soft shapes, and then lost it completely to shadow. The breeze picked up just enough to bring a shiver to my arms, so I rolled slightly and pulled the blanket tighter. The fabric smelled faintly of sunshine and laundry soap. I pressed my cheek into it and felt the warmth of my own body come back to me. The ground held firm. My body, which sometimes in bright rooms forgets how to be still, remembered without effort. The stars continued their quiet work. It was all so ordinary and so astonishing in equal measure. Time passed in the uncomplicated way it does when nothing is being demanded of it. I did not check a clock. The world told me what I needed to know. The Milky Way had shifted slightly, the ribbon now more tilted, like the angle of a kind smile. The eastern horizon had a hint of lighter tone, not yet color, just the barest suggestion that night would eventually slide toward morning. For now, there was only this: a hill, a person breathing, a sky that had been saved up for such a time. I thought for a while about the word open and how it felt inside my mouth. The open sky, the open hill, the open, unrushed edge of night. My hands lay open on the blanket. My thoughts were open to the little things. The delicate sound of grass tips tapping one another, the liquid note of a single bird waking and then deciding to wait a little longer before singing. The quiet thud as a moth bumped against my shoe and rested there, as if my presence were a safe harbor. Openness and safety held hands and stayed with me. An idea came to me as easily as a leaf floats onto water, that the sky and the ground had always been meeting over this hill, that nights like this have happened longer than memory. I was glad to be one more person who had come and looked and felt their hearts soften. I thought of passing this place, softly in speech, to someone else someday, the way you might pass a book you love into a friend's hands. I would tell them about the mint on the breeze, the owl's calm voices, the way the Milky Way spread like a luminous shawl. I lay on my side for a time, so I could watch the little valley below, where a farmhouse sat with one window lit. The light was warm, a single square that suggested someone reading, or washing a cup, or looking out and thinking their own quiet thoughts. I thought about the gentle satisfactions of closing a drawer and smoothing a tablecloth, of setting a mug next to a sink and turning off a lamp. Even from here, the sense of those simple actions settled into the night like a stone settling into a shallow pool. When I rolled onto my back again, the sky seemed closer, though I knew it was not. It was an illusion made by familiarity, or perhaps by ease. This is what happens, I thought, when you let yourself be still. The things you love best come forward and sit beside you. A whisper of a shooting star stitched a short seam across the Milky Way. I didn't move. My eyes did what they do, and the moment passed into me as simply as a drop of clean water melts on the tongue. The ground had cooled just enough that the hairs on my arms rose and then settled. Somewhere a dog barked once, soft, and then twice, and then, perhaps reassured by its own sound, went quiet. The owls traded another few notes. The bats did one more graceful circuit, and then left the field to the crickets and the moths. The grass, which had whispered with my steps hours ago, now whispered again with gentle rearrangements caused by the night creatures, doing their small tasks with great attention. Part of me considered walking down to the creek to dip my fingers and feel the water's cold polish. The thought was pleasant, and I let it sit with me for a while, then decided to stay where I was. Movement could wait. The creek would be there in the morning, telling the day what it had told the night. I curled my toes inside my shoes and softened my jaw. The sky had not become boring. It had become more itself somehow, and in doing so, allowed me to become more myself as well. A longer time passed. If anyone had asked me what I had done with it, I would have answered nothing and everything. I watched and breathed and felt the coolness stretch over my arms and shoulders like a soft sheet. I let my gaze drift over star fields and empty spaces, appreciating the dark as much as the light. I learned the small differences between the cricket songs, how one's rhythm holds steady like a heartbeat, and another's rises and falls in a sound like slow raindrops on a roof. The smell of the earth grew more pronounced as the dew settled. It had the sweetness of hay and the clean undernote of stone. I reached out a hand and laid my palm on the grass beside me. The blades were cool and a little damp on their tips. A small beetle walked over my knuckles and then off again, not alarmed at the landscape change, only turning its course slightly in the way that small lives adjust with ease. I felt a spark of kinship with the beetle, each of us moving a little, then resting, always in the same wide world. Above me, the constellations continued their patient turning. Draco curved around the Little Dipper with a slow, sinuous grace. Cassiopeia lounged in her familiar W, a queen reduced to a few bright points, which made her feel more like a neighbor than royalty. The more I looked, the more the sky felt populated, not just with figures and stories, but with quiet companionships. Stars near stars, dust around stars, all of it kept aloft by distances my mind could not hold and did not need to. My eyelids had become heavier, and I let them fall now and then, opening them again to check. Nothing had shifted too fast. It hadn't. The night knew how to keep its own pace. It neither dawdled nor rushed. It went as it always goes, a reliable presence that adjusts only a little for weather and season. That steadiness was a comfort. I took it in without measuring, as one might absorb warmth through the back on a sunlit bench. Not far away, the fox, or perhaps another like it, passed again, leaving behind the gentlest of scents, a wild, clean smell that belonged to the land. I thought of the different homes folded into this one field, the shallow burrow under the stone where the beetles waited, the twig nest in the bushes where the birds slept with their heads tucked under their wings, the hollows under the roots where the mice nested. I too was home here, though my bed was a blanket and the roof a vault of stars. Another meteor, this one fainter, traced itself in the corner of my eye, and I smiled. Some people like to count them, to claim a tally, to make wishes. Tonight, I let them be gifts without a ledger. I thought of a friend once saying that the universe feels even more generous when we accept what it offers without immediately turning it into a plan. I felt each gift and accepted it, and that was the whole of it. The east had brightened a shade. The change brought no sadness. Night had been so full that the idea of morning felt like an additional gift rather than the taking away of one. Still, I was not ready to speak of light. There was more night yet, more soft breathing and gentle sound. The owl's last call floated up, and then it too quieted. Silence filled the spaces the calls had occupied, not as a gap, but as a presence. Silence is itself a sound, if you listen to it, and tonight it had a deep, even register that sat comfortably within me. I thought of the Milky Way again, and how it looked like a path made by many feet, flattened by passage. It is not, of course, but the mind likes to make connections, and this one felt harmless and kind. I imagined all the people in all the times who had looked up and traced that same path with their eyes, and how we were, in that way, walking together. I did not feel small. I felt connected, like a thread in a fabric that is strengthened by each thread added to it. When I finally sat up, the world responded gently. The blanket shifted under me. A few dry stalks clicked softly. The air touched the back of my neck with a cool hand. I did not feel the usual tug to stand. I stayed seated, legs stretched out, hands resting lightly on my lap. From here, the horizon showed a more definite promise of dawn, a thinness in the darkness that made lower stars wink out, one by one, as if turning down their lamps in favor of the sun's dimmest first light. I sipped water from a bottle I'd brought, and even the sound of the cap twisting felt unnecessary, a small intrusion. But the water itself was life, and it met my mouth perfectly, like an old friend at the door. It was cool and tasted faintly of the metal bottle, which reminded me of trips and camps and other nights under other skies. I put it down again quietly and listened to my breath. It had grown even slower, matched to the night, as if the two of us had reached an agreement without needing to speak. I lay back once more, wanting a few more minutes with the stars before the deeper blue took them for a while. The Milky Way had thinned a little, or perhaps my eyes were adjusting to the changing light. It was still there, still river-like, still sure. I took it in, not to hold it against the day, but to let it be part of me, so the day could rise from it. The stars did not need me to remember them. They would go on. It was me who needed this, to remember who I am when I am not protecting myself with lists and plans. There is a way light comes into the world that feels like a second breath. The first is the night's exhale, the release and the settling. The second is this early inhale, cool and hopeful. I felt it then, the world drawing in, ready to color itself again. The grass carried tiny beads of moisture now, each catching whatever light there was, and making it soft. The small beetle, or maybe a new one, moved slowly across a blade, careful with its steps. I smiled, and the act of smiling felt like a stretch I'd needed. I sat up a second time and gathered the blanket, folding it in half, and then again without creasing it harshly. The softness of the fabric was a pleasure. I shook a few tiny seeds from it and watched them fall to the ground, thinking of how everything in this scene had its rhythm of up and down, of falling and rising. I tucked the bottle into my bag and looped the strap across my shoulder. The hill did not ask me to leave. It merely offered me the chance to go and bring a little of this calm with me. Before I stood, I took one more long look. The Milky Way, paler now, still hung in place like a lingering dream. The teapot of Sagittarius poured steadily. The swan floated. The queen reclined. All of it quiet, composed, available. I felt gratitude in the simplest form, not as a complicated thought shaped into a sentence, but as a warm presence in my chest. I placed my hands flat on the ground, felt the coolness of dew, and let that anchor me a final time. When I rose, I did so slowly, unrolling my legs and pressing the edge of my shoe into the earth to find balance. The world stayed steady. The fox, somewhere in the grasses, made a gentle sound, a barely there acknowledgement. The first true morning bird gave a small, curious note, as if testing the air. A tiny cloud in the east blushed and then faded back to gray. I started down the path I had come up, each step a quiet conversation with the ground. The walk down felt like going forward, and also like going deeper into calm. The mint that had ridden the breeze earlier was stronger now, brushing against my ankles and releasing its fresh scent. The creek's voice was still soft, but had a new clarity, as if it too had woken a little. I passed the birches, their trunks glowing faintly, and ran my hand lightly over one. The bark's papery layers were cool and reassuring, their peels like soft pages in a book. I did not take any, just read the texture with my fingertips. At the bottom of the hill, I paused and turned back to look. The crest was now just a gentle line against the sky, a reminder rather than a stage. I could still see one bright star stubbornly holding at the edge of dawn. I raised my hand in a small, almost unconscious gesture, a wave that acknowledged the night's kindness. Then I put my hand down and continued, my steps quiet in the damp grass. I reached the gate at the path's end and slipped through it, careful not to let it click loudly. Behind me, the field held all I had given it and all it had given me, without tally. Ahead, the day would come slowly, as days should. I felt ready for it, not armored, but clothed in something finer, a calm that the open sky had given freely, a sense that what is vast can be gentle, and that what is small can be luminous. My mind, like my hands, felt open, ready to hold only what would fit without strain. As I walked toward home, the world continued its quiet unveiling. The first porch light went off somewhere, and a window brightened at the farmhouse, like an eye slow to open. A rooster far away hested a note and then committed to it, confident but not insistent. The air held the faintest warmth, a promise folded into the cool. I thought of lying down later, under a different roof, and closing my eyes, the memory of the Milky Way, a gentle ribbon behind my eyelids. Sleep would come easily, I felt, not because I had earned it through effort, but because rest is a gift that follows a person who has learned, even for a little while, how to be still. I walked slowly with no hurry. My shoulders were level and head was eased back as if the neck had loosened its grip. On my journey, I had found something, though it was not something I could have described as an object. It was a way of breathing in a wide world, a way of seeing that all the small things, stars, beetles, dew, fur, feathers, leaves, chance to be together in the same breath. The path lifted slightly before it met the lane, and I took the rise as if it were a bow to the stage I had left. I did not look back again. I did not need to. The hill would be there, and the sky would be there, and I now carried a little of both in my chest. In the place where worry sometimes rears and shuffles its papers, there was instead a long, quiet place like the river of stars. I stepped onto the lane, the small stones pressing pleasantly into the soles of my shoes, and turned toward home. The calm walking with me in perfect step. By the time I reached the door, the light was stronger, and the night's sounds had blended into the first noises of morning. I paused with my hand on the knob, taking one last breath of the cool air. Then I went inside, set my blanket down, and sat on the edge of the bed. When I lay back and closed my eyes, the Milky Way unfurled once more on the dark behind them, soft and sure. The constellations took their places without argument, and the quiet hill rose under me in memory, steady and kind. Sleep came like the breeze had come, without hurry, without demand. It brought with it the field, the fox, the owl, the dewy grass, the scent of mint, the tiny lanterns of fireflies, the satin dark between the stars, and the wide, luminous river arcing overhead. And even as I drifted, the sense of the world's gentle skies and of the open, generous night remained with me, holding me the way the earth had held me on the hill, trustworthy, spacious, and calm. That was the end of the story. Thank you for listening. I hope it brought you calm, comfort, and a little peace. Remember, you can always return to our channel whenever you need a moment to relax and unwind. If you enjoyed this tale, consider liking and subscribing so you won't miss the next one. Until next time, take a deep breath, let go, and carry this sense of calm with you.